guys, how you doing? This is Ben, the Real Estate Pro, coming at you, hopefully going to kick you some knowledge. So today, the day that this video is being made is March 15th, 2024. And today, the National Association of Realtors released, a settlement with the plaintiffs in all the different lawsuits. I believe it's the Sitzer Burnett, as well as all the many lawsuits that are around the nation. I think the only ones that they didn't settle on was the buyer lawsuits. I'm not sure, but I believe those are I think the Baton lawsuits are the only ones that didn't settle on. But this pretty much outlines what the plaintiffs and NAR settled on and how we may be doing business moving forward. Now, one of the things that we have to understand is this is not final, and court approval is needed in order for the settlement to actually be ratified. On top of that, there may even be the possibility the DOJ may get involved. You can't discount that. They've already done it in the No Select MLS PIN case, which kind of shaped a lot of these settlements that have kind of come about in the last few weeks. But anyway, so what you're looking at here on the screen is a settlement fact sheet that was given out by NAR, and I think they kind of just gloss over a little bit of what the settlement is. So the settlement is for $418,000. It's a structured settlement, meaning they're going to pay so much. I think next month, I think it's like $5 million next month or in 90 days, and then over the years up until $418 million. So I think they did a really good job, considering that they were looking at $1.5 billion, maybe even up to just under $5 billion. Had they not settled, and maybe lost appeals or whatnot. But they're not going to appeal. They're not going to be filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy or anything like that. They're going to go ahead and settle this case, and hopefully it goes smoothly. We'll just have to wait and see. And the first part, if you go to NAR's website, and I'll put a link to this fact sheet. The first part is just basically cover, what members or who's covered under the settlement, and pretty much all NAR members and all MLSs. There's a few people that aren't, but for the most part, almost everybody. Okay, and I'm going to skip to, just because I don't want to make this video too long, is the practice changes, because that's really the part everybody's interested in, us as real estate agents, because we want to know how we got to navigate this, what we got to do, what we got to avoid doing, and what we can do. So the practice changes are as follows according to this settlement fact sheet. Now, for full disclosure, I think they kind of left a few things out here, or kind of glossed over a couple of points, but I'll go over that here as we move along. Okay, so practice changes. We are able to retain the right of consumers to continue to have cooperative compensation as an option, so long as they pursue it off MLS through negotiation and consultation with the real estate professionals. The reason why I say off MLS is you're going to see off MLS or a reference to MLS quite a bit, and I'll get into that here in a second. NAR has agreed to put in place a new rule prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. What's interesting is it actually underlines on the MLS. The change will go into effect mid-July 2024. Well, what I find interesting there is that's only like 4 months away. So I thought that any type of settlement would give a little more time for us to get acclimated and kind of figure out what we're going to do. I thought it'd be more towards the end of the year or maybe beginning of next, but nope. If this holds up, mid-July, all these things are going to take effect. Implications for members: there will continue to be many ways in which buyer brokers could be compensated, including through offers of compensation communicated off MLS. As we have long believed that it is in the interest of the sellers, buyers, and the brokers to make offers of compensation, but using the MLS to communicate offers of compensation would no longer be an option. So this is kind of important, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But the mere fact that me as an agent won't be able to go to MLS and actually see if there's any compensation being offered by a seller at all, that'll be interesting. Now, provided that most people, whenever they want to look at a property, any of my clients, they typically find it on Realtor.com or Zillow. So, I mean, a lot of them don't want to go to their email and click on the little link that I send them to look at properties, they typically just go to Zillow and look around. So anyway, the types of compensation available for buyer brokers continue to take multiple forms depending on the broker-consumer negotiations, including but not limited to fixed fee commission paid directly by consumers, concessions from the seller, portion of the listing broker's compensation. Um, I'm not exactly sure what they mean by the types of compensation available for buyer brokers who continue to make multiple forms. So concessions from the seller, I take a little exception to that, and then portions of the listing broker's compensation. Um, I don't see that actually bearing out in the actual settlement. Maybe it's buried in there. Maybe I haven't taken a look at that part. But anyways, we'll get to that here in a second. Compensation continue to be negotiable and should always be negotiated between agents and the consumers that they serve. Okay. Now that is true now and always has been, but I think you'll have agents tell you that they say it's always been negotiable, which is true. It always has. Okay. It's just a lot of the consumers and their awareness, they may not have known. And I did actually kind of a personal survey of mine not too long ago. I was actually shocked at how many people didn't know it was negotiable. They thought 5 or 6%. They just thought that was what you had to pay. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Implications for home buyers and sellers. The settlement would preserve the choices consumers have regarding real estate services and compensation. After the new rule goes into effect, listing brokers and sellers could continue to offer compensation for buyer broker services, but such offers could not be communicated via the MLS. The settlement expressly provides that seller may communicate seller concessions as buyer closing, such as buyer closing costs via the MLS, provided that such concessions are not conditioned on the use of payment to a buyer broker. So basically what that means is seller concessions, you can do seller concessions, and it's something done all the time. So a seller can say, I'll pay part of your closing costs, or I'll pay for this, or I'll give you this. But you can't use seller concessions to pay the buyer broker. Okay, now if seller concessions are offered, it makes it a lot easier for a buyer to pay their agent. So, maybe you can say that kind of one helps the other. So, that's kind of a good thing to have, is that seller concessions survives, and honestly we all expected it to survive. Now here's the next one, and this I think is a pretty big one. New rule about written agreements. NAR has long encouraged its members to use written agreements because they help consumers understand exactly what services and value will be provided and for how much. The settlement provides that MLS participants working with buyers must enter into a written representation agreement with those buyers. This change will go into effect mid-July 2024. Implication of members and home buyers and sellers. After the new rule goes into effect, MLS participants acting for buyers would be required to enter into a written agreement with their buyers before touring a home. These agreements can help consumers understand exactly what services and value will be provided and for how much. So, this is what's interesting. Okay. You would have to, if you were a buyer and you wanted to go look at home and hire an agent, before me as an agent could show you that home, we would have to negotiate a fee, how much that fee is going to be, how it's going to be paid to me, and then once you sign that agreement, as well as the other parts of that agreement, then I can show you a home. But if this holds up, and if it's the way that I'm reading it, okay, now I'm not an attorney or anything, I'm not giving legal advice here, but the way that I'm interpreting it in my head here is, I can't show you a home until you sign one of these agreements with me, which is a little different than how it works now. They're kind of depending on the state. Like in California, I don't think I've ever had one signed, ever. Because there really wasn't any reason to, and how was I going to enforce it? But now it appears that it's going to be required. So something that might come. Well, I'll get to that part later. Other cases concerning the MLS cooperative compensation model rule, because the agreement would not end litigation as to all defendants, litigation concerning cooperative compensation may continue. And this is the Baton 1 and the Baton 1 case, which is the buyer's agent. So So that you guys can go ahead and read the rest of it. There's still some good information in here as far as kind of a little, about what they considered, how it's going to affect their operations, that type of thing. All right, guys. So this is Industry Relations Podcast. It's hosted by Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson. They are industry experts in real estate. Rob is an attorney. I don't believe either one of these men are agents. And Greg he's a little more into the technology and the vendors as it relates to real estate. So whenever I go into their podcast, there's a lot of good information as to different things that are coming down the pipe, both from a legal standpoint and from a technology standpoint. So now industry relations, I think it's a travesty they only have 733 subscribers. It should be way more than that. I mean, this is like must-see TV if you ask me as a real estate agent. But I thought that they probably would explain this document a little bit better. It's the actual settlement document versus the settlement fact sheet that NAR brought out. I think NAR kind of glossed over some things. It was kind of just a general overview. But I think as far as the practices portion, I think the settlement kind of expounds a little bit more on what do's and don'ts and explains a little bit better. But let's go ahead and listen in. Like I said, I'm getting in about a little under halfway because I guess I want you guys to be able to go to the podcast and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to their podcast.
Now, so let's move down to practice changes, because this is what everyone's going to be interested in.
True.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll just react to it, right? Okay. Eliminate, prohibit any requirement that listing brokers or sellers must make offers of compensations, buyer brokers, or other buyer representatives, either directly or through buyers. Eliminate, prohibit any requirement such offers, if made, must be blanket, unconditional, unilateral, right? Okay, so that's going to be gone. Prohibit MLS participants, subscribers, brokers from making offers of compensation on the MLS to buyer brokers, other buyer representatives, yada, yada, yada. Okay. Eliminate broker compensation field. Okay. And prohibit the sharing of offer compensation, yada, 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 via any other realtor MLS.
Okay, hold on. So pause right there.
Yeah, let's pause right there.
Because you've been saying, yeah.
Now, before they say anything, what's interesting there is that, see, me as a real estate agent, I can go to MLS and I can look at information that's not privy to the public. And one of those things is if a seller, and just about every, I mean, at least right now, just about every listing has it, what the seller is offering for buyer's agent commission. I can see that. Okay. Well, according to this, that's going to be a thing of the past. But let's go ahead and listen in some more.
In whatever, you've been talking about this forever. This kind of stuff here, and some more going here, but just initial reaction. What do you think about how does this affect steering? I mean, if there's nothing on the MLS that even...
I mean, in theory, it eliminates it, but hold on to that, right?
Right. It eliminates it in that I can't see what commissions someone is giving. So, I can't really differentiate between any of them. So if a client says, I want to look at this house, I just go show them that house. I would do that anyway. I was never one of those agents that had to know what the commission was. I just want to know that there is one or there isn't one so I can maneuver appropriately. Okay. But unfortunately, even though there are agents out there that will say, oh no, no one does that. No one steers, or no one says, oh, well, I won't go show that property because they're not giving that much commission. Well, that's just not true. There are agents that do that. Okay, I've watched it. When I was a loan officer, when we had real estate, because the company that I worked with at that time, we had real estate agents and loan officers basically in the same building. I saw it all the time. Okay, agents like, I'm not showing that. They're only giving 2%, so I'm not showing that property. If they want me to show that property, they got to be at least 2.5. I saw it happen all the time. Okay, so when I hear people say that, it's like I just kind of roll my eyes a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean all real estate agents did that, but I'm just saying I saw it more than once. All right, let's keep listening here.
Because we're going to go through some other provisions that makes me go, really? So hold on to it. So the one interesting thing here is any other realtor MLS field, right? So why? Because they're going to allow concessions field, I think. Let me see.
It's kind of what
4 is kind of important.
Ed's been talking about.
because you cannot condition participation or membership in MLS based on offering compensation. Now, this has been one of these little weird sub industry like within the MLS space. It's been going on for 5 years now, 6 years, right? Where the MLS has really wanted to go after, say, Zillow, right? Because they're like, okay, you're a brokerage for the purpose of getting IDX, but you're not really a brokerage because you don't accept or offer compensation. Under this settlement, that clause is just out. Now, if you want to join the MLS, whether you offer compensation or not, you have to be allowed in.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. Minor point, but interesting.
Yes, okay. Very interesting.
This part's cool. Agree not to create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism, okay, for listing brokers or sellers to make offers of compensation to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives. Okay. And then it says, but this is not violated by Realtor MLS providing data or data feeds to a Realtor MLS participant, or third party, unless the Realtor MLS knows those data and data feeds are being used directly or indirectly to establish or maintain a platform for offers of compensation for multiple brokers.
Now, this next part you definitely want to pay attention to, especially if you're wondering about offers of compensation. Like I said before, I said, remember the term on MLS, off MLS.
And then it actually literally explains it. Realtor MLS cannot intentionally circumvent this requirement. Right? And then I get this. Realtor MLS participant displaying both data or data feeds to MLS and offers a compensation to buyer brokers or other buyer representatives, but only on listings from their own brokerage.
So that's interesting. So if you have XYZ brokerage, and let's say they have 5 listings, then the way I read this, and I, once again, not an attorney, that's just the way I read it. The way that I understand it is, if they're at my brokerage and they're on my website, not on MLS, then I can go ahead and advertise offers of buyer's agent compensation. That's just the way I read it. And I think Rob does too. Let's listen in.
What?
Yeah, what?
Again, I haven't had time to really think about this. This feels like
something to do with, is it a private listing network kind of thing here?
But what it says literally is, I'm a broker. Say I'm Compass, right? I think I can put my own listings on compass.com and say, we are offering 3%.
Right.
Like, you can make offers of compensation through the broker's own website. That's what it sounds like to me. Right?
Could be wrong. Maybe we're misinterpreting, but yeah, I agree with Rob. That's exactly what it sounds like to me too.
Right.
So, hey, people watch.
Well, we got to. This is going to take a little more to marinate on this.
Obviously.
Sure.
So let's keep going. All right. And then we get this. Now, every realtor, you must have a written buyer agency agreement before you can show a home. And that agreement
before you can tour the home, yeah.
Correct. You must specify and conspicuously disclose the amount or rate of compensation you'll receive and how this amount will be determined. Right. So the buyer agreement that is mandatory must say to the buyer, here's the amount or rate of compensation. I'm like, okay, that feels like it's preserving compensation, which it does. And then it says amount of compensation.
In a way, though, what it does do is, like, if you look at sites like Zillow and Redfin that have this kind of Uberization, right, where it's like request showing, we'll have somebody there by 11 a.m. Well, and these, because these could be unrepresented buyers. They're just surfing the internet. They want to see a home. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a weird situation. I think it blows it all up, in my opinion. Okay, so I'm an unrepresented buyer. I go to Redfin or Zillow. I click the button. I want to see this agent at by 11 a.m. It says. Yeah. Yeah. I go there, and now the realtor goes in front of me and says, "Oh, before I can open this door, would you please sign this?
Right.
This 5-page agreement."
Right.
Yeah, man. And I don't think they can just put up a modal that says agree to these terms of service and then click, and now you're. I mean, I think it says there you got to be really, really, it says you have to be really detailed there. So
that's a great point.
yeah, I don't know. I think Redfin and Zillow got.
This is what it's saying. Okay, must be
Yeah.
objective, ascertainable, may not be open ended. All right.
Now, I think he skips kind of over a part that I think is pretty important. Okay, I was listening to another podcast, and I'm not going to mention. It's somebody that I follow quite closely. I listen in pretty much just like these guys. I listen in all the time because they have a lot of great data. But they had a broker that came on today that was talking about this settlement, and I think they kind of got the wrong idea because I think they were under the impression that uh, the uh, current cooperative compensation model is intact, and I don't think that that's the case. Far from it, actually. So the part that I think that they are people that a lot of agents aren't understanding is, yes, you can have a seller pay you uh, as a buyer's broker if they want to provide that compensation. Okay, but you have to think of it this way. With the way Rob was saying, or Rob and Greg were saying, is that you and I talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Is you find a buyer and you negotiate what you're going to be paid up front even before you open the door to the house. Okay. Well, if you show the house, okay, that compensation is set. All right, between you and your buyer. Okay. If the seller is offering, so if let's say you negotiate 2% with your buyer, but you find out later because you're not really going to know because you can't look at MLS, right? How much, if there's any buyer's compensation at all, and then you're going to be negotiating with your buyer ahead of time anyway. At least that's the way that I would do it. You may come to find out later, wow, they were offering 3%. But if your agreement with your buyer is only 2%, then you kind of have a problem, okay? Because you can only be compensated 2% because that's what your agreement says. All right. Now, what Rob is talking about, he kind of glossed over, but it says the amount of compensation reflected must be objectively ascertainable, easily understandable, and may not be open-ended. And I don't know if you can read what it says there, but it actually gives an example. Buyer broker compensation shall be so it gives an example of an open-ended phrase that I've actually seen on buyer broker agreements, but it's buyer broker compensation shall be whatever amount the seller is offering to the buyer, right? You can't do that. That's open-ended. Okay? So whatever you agree to is whatever you get paid. Is essentially what that says.
And you can't get paid more than what's in the buyer agreement. Right.
Yeah.
So because one of the issues was
Perfect.
What happens if more than, like, nope, you can't take more than that. What's left open is, okay, what happens to that money?
Now, I'll tell you what I would do. If I did find out that, let's say I agreed to 2% with my buyer and I found out that the seller was offering 3%, well, I would ask them, say, hey, look, I only need 2 of it. Could you convert the rest of it to a buyer credit or maybe increase the seller concession if possible? Because, if I'm able to do that, I'm going to look like a total winner to my buyer, right? And, if there's money on the table, it's my fiduciary responsibility to use that to my buyer's advantage, okay? Because I can't take it. I've already agreed with my buyer how much I'm being compensated, and that's what I should be paid. I can't take a penny more than that. But if there's money on the table, why not have it be advantageous for my buyer? Why not help? Now, I understand there's limits. I mean, I'm also a loan officer, so there are limits to the amount of seller concession, depending on the type of lending that you get. But at the same time, if that money's there and it can be used to help your buyer, absolutely you should do that. At least I would.
Right. Like, I don't know.
This is gonna be interesting. It's gonna, for the forms companies out there. I'm thinking from a vendor's perspective. There's going to be a tidal wave, of form changes.
Lots of work,
just like the COVID disclosure form back in the day.
That's right. Lots of
Everybody's going to be flooded by this by July. Yeah.
Lots of work. And then you get this: realtor MLS participants acting for sellers, so the listing agent, conspicuously disclose to sellers and obtain seller approval for any payment or offer of payment that the listing broker seller will make to another broker, agent, or other representative. Such disclosure must be in writing, provided in advance of any payment, and specify the amount or rate of such payment. So long story short, compensation survives.
It's like you said, compensation survives. Now, is it going to be a little different? Yeah, it's going to be a little different. I'm kind of going back to that podcast and that one particular broker that was talking, and like I said, I think they were operating under, maybe they misunderstood, or maybe the information they got was off a little bit, but yeah, there was one portion where they were talking about how we can still go ahead and negotiate a commission with the seller. And I don't think that's true. Not according to what I'm reading here, unless somebody, somebody in the well, down below me here, can ask me a question, or maybe steer me right. But what sounds like to me is there isn't going to be any type of negotiation with the sellers, other than maybe just asking them to pay the buyer's agent commission as part of your offer. Like me as a seller agent, me personally, if I was representing the seller, how I might do it is, if you're because you're the buyer's agent isn't necessarily going to see what you're offering, especially on an MLS. I would tell my seller this. I would say, hey, listen, I'm going to negotiate my fee. Number one, 2.5% flat fee, whatever it may be. I would negotiate that amount, and I would tell them, I'd say, hey, look, if you want to offer a buyer's agent commission, you can. You don't have to, okay? But what I suggest that we do is we go ahead and let people make offers requesting buyer's agent compensation, and then we'll look at those on a case-by-case basis. And on the listing agreement, we could possibly put, or on the agreement that we have, we could possibly put something to the effect of that you're willing to give a buyer's agent commission up to a certain amount. So if a buyer's agent comes in and says, hey, I only want 2%, well, you're offering 3%, okay? But you don't have to give them 3%. You can just go ahead and give them what they requested. So it's a way on the buyer side of things to say, okay, well, they're only asking for 2%. They're not asking for any seller concession or anything like that. Hey, you just saved yourself a little bit of money. So that's just an example of how I might maneuver on a particular, sale or in a particular situation. All I know is it's going to be a brand new world, and it's going to be interesting over the next few months to see exactly what things are going to look like. It's only 4 months away, and I know 4 months may sound like a long time, but actually, it'll be here pretty quick, and we'll have to adapt to whatever's coming here in the future. Now, I expect that we'll hear some more news on this settlement over the next few months. Maybe the DOJ will get involved. Maybe they'll come back and elaborate on some things that are in this agreement that seem a little ambiguous, maybe a little bit unclear, maybe be a more simpler way of saying it, but we'll see. But anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this particular podcast, both industry relations podcasts and my podcast. Hopefully you enjoyed them. Please like, share, and subscribe, and go to Industry Relations Podcast and be sure to like, subscribe, and share theirs as well. And like I said, guys, it should be something you watch every single week. But anyways, guys, hope you guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you next time.